host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I have been gearing up for this podcast for a while now, and I am thrilled. So this is a topic that we have not covered yet. So it's going to be an interesting one for you all. We have Carolyn Robistow here with us to talk about alcohol and entrepreneurs and ways to increase awareness of the popular messages that lead to shame and decrease control around habit change and what can be done instead. So Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy we're getting to do this. And
I'm thrilled you're
better
here.
Cooperate.
Yeah, so we had some technical difficulties and we've got to fill the people in. So we met at a retreat earlier in the year and had a great conversation by the pool. And then you took off and set sail. And so those technical difficulties were kind of around that. So fill everybody in on what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so literally set sail, although not quite literally. We're on a motorboat. There is no sail. There's a stay sail, but that's it.
Important distinction.
It is an important distinction. And we leased out our house, sold most of what we own, and are now traveling around the eastern coast of the United States and down into the Bahamas for the next year and a half at least, with hopes to see where it goes from there. So that's our plan.
How cool
all the
is
while
that?
Doing the online work of helping entrepreneurs get healthy relationships with alcohol.
Ooh, so tell us more. How did that come about?
Well, it came out of my own experience, as so much of our work does, right?
Yes.
I was building a business. There was networking happy hours. And obviously I didn't just start drinking because I was building a business, but it was something that I questioned for about 2 years before I figured out what the real story was there. And when I figured it out, it immediately shifted for me. And then I kind of waited and thought, well, why is no one talking about this? And then I just sort of did that thing that we hate to do, but I love like the compassionate climb idea of sometimes we just have to meet ourselves with compassion and do it. And I was like, then I guess I then now need to be the one talking about it, because there is a lot out there. Obviously, there's a lot of information about alcohol addiction specifically. What I was dealing with didn't match any of those experiences. And I drank the way everyone around me drank for the most part, or the majority of people around me. I don't think that anyone around me would have said like, oh, what you're doing is really stands out as a problem. But it reached the point where it just wasn't working for me. And I tried all the things. Like I tried the dry January, I would do Whole30. I tried fitness challenges. I tried paying for different challenges where it was like, well, try learning how to cook healthy and then you can satisfy cravings with cooking healthy. And then I tried, the 1 year no beer, and it was like, put a fitness goal that'll inspire you so much that then you won't want to drink. And none of it worked because I was already a very fit person. Like I did triathlons in my past. Like I was already a fit person, and I already liked healthy food. None of it stuck for me. And so I ended up having to find a different way. And now I want to share the way, I guess. But I ended up getting a bunch of soapboxes and little burrs in my side about the way that conversation is going already.
Yes. So tell me more about that. So what are some of these messages that you have found to be very common that need to be shifted?
Yeah, well, here I go. Let me just climb off real quick. You just yank me down. I need to get down. So it's not even that they're problematic messages. It's that they're missing components. And so when they don't work for us, we feel like we're the problem. And so one of my first messages that I try to kind of address for people, and I have this in a free training, this is the number one thing, and I lead into a couple other ones, but the first thing is that we have been treating it like a math game. Like, moderation is about how much you have and how often. And here's my thing, like, moderate drinkers do not moderate their drinking. They are not actively thinking about how much they're drinking and when is their next one, and have they already reached their limit and what will they do instead so that they can hold themselves at their limit. But when we are what I lovingly call Groundhog Day drinkers, we think about it. And it's more like these rules become how we moderate, and we focus on the math, and it's not a math game. It's a relationship game. And what I try to get people to think of it is like, well, let's say that you had a friend, your best friend, right? And that it was considered, like, we all know about toxic relationships, right? And we don't want to be in a toxic relationship. And so if we were to look at this friendship and think, well, how do I make sure this is a healthy relationship? Well, and we'll go with the number 7, because for women, that's the standard US recommendation is 7 drinks a week, right? You would never go to your friend and sit down on Sunday night and pull out your calendars and go, okay, 7 hours is healthy. We already know on Friday, we're going to hang out together for 4 hours. So which 4 days are we not going to talk so that we can make it through the week and still have a healthy relationship? But we do that with our habits and alcohol primarily, because we've been, I would say, misinformed that it has anything at all to do with the quantity, and it doesn't. Like I said, moderate drinkers, they're not moderating anything. They just drink in moderate amounts. It's not effort. Does that make sense?
It does. I think that's a really good comparison. But what would somebody use as a checkpoint then if we become so accustomed to base it off of the number? And I do see value in figuring out how alcohol affects you and how you want to feel and how you don't, and how it impacts situations. And so what would you suggest as an alternative?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So the same thing we suggest when we're helping our clients with toxic relationships. And we say, well, how do you feel when you're actively engaging with this? Well, how do you feel when you're in the space with this person or alcohol and not actively engaging in it? Do you feel weary? Where is it? Where is it coming from? How do I make sure it doesn't catch me unawares? Or do you feel like it's just over there doing its thing and that's great and we'll connect when we do, and then if we don't, whatever, and I trust that we'll be fine? And how do you feel when you're not in the same space and actively engaging with it? So how do you feel with it, around it, and away from it? And I think we do this with relationships. Why don't we do it with our habits? And because then it's not all about the number, because the number is going to be different for everybody.
Very true. And I can also say the number is different depending on the situation, your age, your tolerance. But I also feel the need to intertwine the two, because that was such a great example. So if you think about it where the focus is alcohol consumption and the person is in a relationship and their consumption has an impact on the person that they're with and their own comfort level in social situations, how would you approach that?
I will say more about what you mean, because I want to make sure I get what you're asking.
Yeah. So the way that you're describing it, it sounds like you're really speaking about that person as an individual and challenging some of what we have been led to believe or encouraged to focus on to determine what moderation looks like.
Yes.
But then I'm also thinking about all of us as social beings and being in romantic relationships or familiar relationships or parent-child. And we all, to some extent, I would argue, have to decide what our relationship with alcohol is going to be in our life. Where are we going to fall on that spectrum? And so someone's alcohol consumption, when they're in a relationship with someone else, could have an impact on that other person. And so how does that get thrown into the mix?
It does. And what you're talking about too is the health of that relationship and what we each bring to the table, right? And what I will tell you is true of most of the Groundhog Day drinkers that I work with is that the people that they're in relationship with, it's not a thing. Like, it doesn't bother them. They don't think about it. If anything, they're concerned that their friends or partner or whatever will see them differently if they decide to give it up, won't want them around anymore because, you know, what if I'm not the fun person that I was to them?
Interesting.
And so it's not
what I would think.
Yeah, it's less about does my drinking impact our relationship and more about I don't feel good about it. Even if it matches what the world is telling me is healthy and acceptable, I don't feel good about it. And so then we bring in the entrepreneurial piece, which is so many, and I don't know if this is true for you or not, but like I'm building my second business now. When I built my first one and it was a local business, it was my therapy practice. It was happy hours, networking events, parties and they were great. Like where I had my private practice, we have the most amazing group of therapists on the face of the planet. Like anyone who is a therapist needs to go be a therapist in the Woodlands, Texas. It is the best. Okay. But it just is a really social group. And there was, wine at every function. And I struggled with feeling like I would be able to, it was like high school. Like it was like, will I fit in if I'm seen as no fun or prudish or, whatever our childhood parts come up with for that. But so it was less like, and I think that's it. So maybe it's important for me to clarify then what makes a Groundhog Day drinker, right?
Yes,
because this is really not anyone's turn.
Other end of the spectrum where this is not somebody that would overtly be identified as having a problem.
Right. Exactly. It's just that relationship piece. When we are engaging with it, around it, or away from it, it just takes up mental energy that we'd rather not expend on it. And so Groundhog Day drinkers, what's more popular now is we've got this concept of gray area drinking. That's kind of the more known thing. But what it is we exist in shades of gray. Our relationship exists in shades of gray. And there's this gray area between healthy and unhealthy. But you can have a healthy relationship with alcohol and still drink in the gray area. What I'm talking about is Groundhog Day drinkers. So it is a type of gray area drinker, but it's almost more specific. And I'll do you one better. I'll break it down into 3 types in a minute. But Groundhog Day drinkers, and this, I eat up things that align this way so much. Like I just nerd out on them. They make my heart so happy. The 1993 movie with Bill Murray called Groundhog Day, right? Like it's a bit of a pop culture reference, but the whole premise of the movie is he just wakes up and has to repeat this day over and over and over again. And for me, a Groundhog Day drinker, and this is how I define it, which I get to do because it's my term, is it doesn't matter how long it's been since they had a drink or how much they drank. It's that when they get up the next morning, they just wish they hadn't done what they like. Not that I hadn't done it, but if I had 2, I'd be mad that I hadn't stuck with my 0. If I had a bottle of wine, I'd be mad that I hadn't had the one I was going to allow myself. Like it was like Groundhog Day, and it doesn't have to be every day. It can be every time I wake up after a holiday, I think, damn, I just wanted this to be the holiday season when I didn't have a glass of wine. And once a year it happens, but it's that concept of you wake up and it's that same nagging thought, regardless of how often it happens. Does that make sense?
It does.
So that's why it's in the gray area, but it's how we feel about it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So take us through, you were having this experience in Texas and kind of questioning in these settings what the right thing to do would be, or whatever the term you want to use. And then from there, where did that take you? What was your kind of process yourself? And what did you find helpful?
Great question. Although what I realized I forgot to say is the other thing I love about Groundhog Day is that it is right after Dry January ends. So calendar wise, it also works perfectly because so many people do Dry January and then they wake up on Groundhog Day and they're like, damn, I thought I was going to continue that. And here I've just had more than I had thought I wanted to have.
Okay.
But to go back to your question, so even then it wasn't like, who am I if I don't? It was like, what if alcohol is the reason I feel because I'm a very quiet, like very introverted person until I get on my Groundhog Day soapboxes. But it's like, how will I show up in these social situations? Like, will I be able to stand up and say who I am and what I do in front of a crowd of people if I don't have my like quote unquote liquid courage, right? And especially as a therapist, right? Like, will people refer to me if they assume I'm not drinking because I have an addiction history? Which again, in my group of people, absolutely. But like, it's such a great community. But what I talk to, or what I hear my clients saying is that, yeah, like, how do I go to these networking events and not have people assume, because the assumption when you don't drink is that it's because you had a problem.
I see.
Versus it's because I just like it better without it, you know? And then you don't want, like, why do I have to explain that to a person? So that was part of it. There was this underlying thing. But the truth is, I had spent about 2 years on this off again, on again, like Groundhog Day relationship. Like I said, I paid for challenges, and they were great challenges. Like, cause I did about a year of free challenges where it was like, I'm going to do Whole30, so I won't have alcohol with that. And then it would, like, I'd sit down and lay out my exceptions. Like, well, except for, you know, Callie's birthday and then Scott's birthday. And, you know, of course we're going to have wine at those. And then I spent the next year where I would buy into the challenges and think, okay, like, and that's when you start to get these like awful, is it me? Am I the problem? Do I have a problem thoughts, which is really disconcerting when it matches, again, like what most of the people around you are doing.
Right.
And so I then at the same time was getting trained in brain spotting, which like is a whole other soapbox. And I was specializing in anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. And the setup we use in brain spotting for OCD has a lot to do with when you know something is true, but your body like has not accepted that it's true, and it compels you to act as though it's not true. And a lot of that goes around understanding which part of my brain is doing what in what moment, and then embodying that that is what's happening. It's not that I need to check the locks. It's that my caudate nucleus hasn't turned the page so that I don't have to check the locks. And I was driving home one day past my, you know, my Walgreens where I would stop all the time for, you know, quote unquote, something I needed, like Scotch tape. But really it was like, well, I might as well get some wine while I'm here. You know? And I thought, and I don't recommend this to anybody because I was driving, and I always drive safe. Please don't brain spot while you're driving. But I did. I was driving by and I was like, oh my gosh, would that work? And I have not wanted to have a drink since. And I say that and I'm just like, it sounds so weird. And so I do want to preface that because I don't want people to come to me and think like, yeah, just teach me that one thing. Like there was the 2 years of buildup for that. It was, so what I ended up discovering was that there are these 3 pillars to the process. There's the brain spotting pillar. And then there's this like personal support pillar where we create what I call a values-based nurture system. And that's the first pillar we put in place. And then we bring in the brain spotting pillar, which is how we embody the change. And then the third pillar is this embodied truth, which is also a brain spotting type thing. But so with all 3 of those combined, like I had unknowingly been combining them in my life. And so then I had to set out and go, well, shit, like now how do I explain this and make it something that other people who are not therapists and are not brain spotters can have, you know, as accessible. Gosh, I went on for a little minute there. I'll let you.
That was great information. So that was that moment where everything clicked. So you're making that really important distinction that you had all of this information and had already been kind of on your own journey. And then that moment, everything came together. It was the culmination.
Yes. And I think that's a really relatable experience, right? Where we know better, but we don't do better and we think it's us. But in reality, it's because of chemical reactions, especially when we introduce alcohol, because it adds chemicals and it just changes not our control, but it changes how things are experienced. Like part of, and this again is part of that free training, y'all are getting like a lot of little snippets of it. Part of the problem is what we know is that neurons that fire together wire together, right? Like this is kind of a common thing. Like when 2 experiences happen simultaneously, they get linked in our system. But what doesn't happen for most Groundhog Day drinkers is you don't ever take a sip of alcohol and immediately regret it. The regret comes on Groundhog Day. It comes the next morning. So getting those 2 experiences to fire together is a challenge. I mean, it's not a challenge. It's actually super easy with brain spotting, but outside of using some sort of, you know, lower brain approach, it is near impossible to have those experiences happen at the same time. So what I've done is made it possible. So we can start firing those neurons together and then you get this complete picture of alcohol. not just here's the drinking and here's the Groundhog Day. They go together. They're in the same file.
So going through these pillars and you have your client with you and this is all new to them, what does that process actually look like?
So it's actually a pretty quick process, quite honestly. It is as simple. So it's a course, right? Where you get like the login, you get your portal, and you go through the lessons. And so the lessons are just the 3 pillars. Part of what's important is the pillars are like pillars in a house, not step 1, 2, 3. And so that took a lot of trial and error. It's very nuanced where if you think about when they raise a house, and again, I'm from Houston and we have like major hurricanes and floods. And so people started raising houses, right? They don't just like jack up the northwest corner and then jack up the northeast corner. You have to do all of them and then add a little bit and then go around and add a little bit to all of them again and then add a little bit to all of them again. So I've had to set up a system with that. But so the first one we address is the personalized daily support with the values-based nurture plan, because it's the easiest to put in place and it is both reactive. So it's what to do if you're struggling, and it's preventative. It helps feed your system and get yourself some soothing so that you're less likely to reach for it in the first place.
And then, this support really crucial to help with the piece that you just spoke about, where when someone who is a Groundhog Day drinker is in a situation, they're not making that connection. So they have those kind of safe people that they've identified that are aware that can help.
It's not even people. It's a thing. And so that's the thing. I keep going back to this. It's with especially the entrepreneurial Groundhog Day drinkers. They don't want a support system. They want the group who gets it. But they're not looking to talk to a person and say, hey, I need you to be like my Jiminy Cricket, Like they just want to show up, want to look cool, calm, collected, want to do what they came to do and nail it. And then they want to go home and they don't want to struggle with whether or not they're going to drink. Right. So they don't tend to want to lean on that outside. And like, even from my story, like, and I want to share this so people know too, like so much of this is true for my story too. I'm not just like outing my clients. Like I didn't even tell my husband for the first year that I didn't think I wanted to drink anymore. Like I would tell him, I think I'm going to not drink for a while. And he's not an idiot, right? Like he caught on, but it wasn't until about a year after that I was like, he was like, are you ever going to again? I was like, no, I don't think so. But I hadn't even said it to him because I just didn't, it just felt too personal. And that was, I just find that to be true with so many of my people. So the personalized daily support system is actually more about, I don't know if you know, maybe a lot of times in these challenges, people will say things like, well, if you want to drink, go for a walk. Or if you want to drink, make a sweet dessert. And what happens is we start to try and make what works for other people work for us. And then when going for a walk doesn't do a damn thing for me, I think, oh, I must, have an addiction. I must be an addict now. And we start to give all those self labels, which is fine. But it's so frustrating when someone else's solution, especially like with dry January, when everyone's saying like, yeah, I just do dry January. And then I just, I go for a walk or I make a mocktail. And then when that's not enough, we assume it's us versus, well, I don't really like mocktails. Like, of course that didn't do it for me. I don't like them. And like I said, with the 1 year no beer, and I'm not knocking that challenge. It's a great challenge, but it was like train for an event. Well, shit, I was already training for events. That didn't do a damn thing for me. It was like, great. Now this will be easy to be like, well, I've already, had wine while I'm training for an event. So the personalized daily support is more about how do we very quickly and rapidly put in place what you actually do care about. So that's why it's a values-based nurture plan. We base it all on creating what I call a lighthouse value set.
Okay.
And it's a whole process I walk people through, but it's simple and fast.
An important distinction, it's not people.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or it can be. I mean, it's whatever that person,
but it doesn't have to be.
It matters. It's whatever they value.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the first piece, but like you said, it's kind of a slow build of everything simultaneously.
Yeah. So the other two pieces. Yeah. So the second piece is the brain spotting, and I have self brain spotting school. This part is actually, I have 2 courses, and I have one where I do self brain spotting just for business owners who already have a healthy relationship with alcohol. And that piece is actually identical in both courses. It's just, this is self brain spotting school. It doesn't get you trained to use it with anybody else. It doesn't certify you or anything like that. It just teaches you, here's what you need to know to use this for yourself. And it's a 90-minute thing. It's broken into like 10, 15-minute little bite-sized chunks because entrepreneurs are busy. Well, everyone's busy. And so you can either binge through it and then get started, or you can, space it out and chunk it. But I have a calendar too that's like, just on this day, get through this part. It's got like the most satisfying check boxes.
So are you working with people simultaneously, one-on-one in conjunction?
So we're working in a group in conjunction. Okay. We meet once a week and we alternate. 1 week we have just coaching where it's like, okay, I've got, I need to tweak my practice, or I need to understand something, or I need to, I'm coming up, which part of my values-based nurture plan would this work for? And then on the alternating weeks, we do group brain spotting together. Mm-hmm. And I teach 4, maybe 5 at this point, specific brain spotting setups that go uniquely with alcohol use and Groundhog Day, really for any habit. And so we kind of alternate through those on the group brain spotting experiences.
Wow. So talk about a niche, but you light up when you talk about this. I mean, clearly it's one of those topics that you found something that you've seen so much success personally and with clients. Yeah. So do you find that you ever look for anything to kind of change it up? Or do you really enjoy the fact that this is the majority of the clients that you work with?
So the brain spotting for business owners is called the Balanced Productivity Blueprint. It's kind of the thing to change it up, but it is set up the exact same way, to be quite honest. I just do one group And part of too, what is really true for me, and I used to take people on individually and would walk them through the course individually, just kind of at a different price point. And every once in a while I will do that. But as you found out, it can be tricky when you live on a boat to find sustainable Wi-Fi and to have enough time in the day to do all the things that boat life comes with and have that many hours to dedicate. So group, and the thing with group too is, like I said, with the entrepreneurs, there's this idea of no one can know. And so this is just a group of people who they just effing get it. And it's no one is here because they're, admitting anything or naming themselves anything other than a Groundhog Day drinker, I guess. But it's more like we are too busy and our work is too important to be walking around with the ankle weights of alcohol. And that's it. Why would I walk around with 2-pound ankle weights on all day? Mm-hmm. It's not a terrible thing, but it's sure, we love efficiency, and that just isn't efficient. So that's part of the group, is just other people who nerd out on efficiency. That's good enough for us.
So have you found it challenging to find these entrepreneurs?
From time to time, it kind of comes in waves. With dry January coming up, with the holidays coming up, I anticipate it will be on more people's minds. But yeah, it comes and goes. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you found a way to navigate this while you're
navigating
on the ocean. Yeah. And it sounds like there has been tremendous success. So do you have any statistics? I mean, there's so many avenues that people can go, and this seems like it's been such a positive thing. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that?
I think it goes back to that values-based nurture program where if a dry January works for a person, then great. And if a person feels happy with their relationship with alcohol, fantastic. Most of the people I work with are not looking to say they're never going to drink again, or say that they're going to, be a moderate drinker or whatever. They just don't want it to take up so much brain space. Mm-hmm. And so that can be hard to get a statistic on, right? It's more about the experience and the relationship, which is kind of where we started, right? It's not a numbers game. Mm-hmm. It's a feelings game, which is a hard sell a lot of times. Yeah.
Well, you've definitely laid a foundation and given us some indications, but if somebody were listening, what would be maybe some of those telltale signs that this is something that they would benefit from trying, and that they are really that ideal person for a program like this?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it would be if they had that Groundhog Day experience where they were like, yes, it doesn't look like a problem to the external world. I just don't feel good about it. And like I said, and I know we're wrapping up, there just are 3 types of Groundhog Day drinkers. And if let's just say this. If someone is listening and they want to know the 3 types, I have a quick 20-minute video where I lay out the 3 types and the strengths and the struggles of each so that you can start building on that. And, people can reach out to me and I will get them that video. And then I have the training where I go through the 3 main things. The first one we talked about with it's not math, it's a relationship, and then 2 other things. And, my hope is that just helps people recognize whether this is a good approach for them or not, because it's not for everybody.
Yeah. No, that's great. I was going to ask what you use for a screening tool or to kind of determine if this is appropriate. And that sounds spot on.
Yeah. I do a consultation call with most people to get on. And then I have a window where if people get in and it's just not the right fit, there's a window to get out.
Okay. That's good to know too.
Yeah.
So I will have to say that this was not only a very interesting conversation, but it's so refreshing to be talking to someone who is so real and authentic and who is clearly so enthusiastic about everything that you're talking about. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Enthusiastic is such a kind word for it. Thank you.
So fill everyone in. If this is something that they're interested in learning more about, they would like to access some of those resources, schedule a consult call. What's the best way for them to get?
Sorry, I don't know if you hear all the dogs running and barking.
I love it. It goes with the shirt.
And the boat life. I'm at the back of the boat under the transom at the back. So I would say right now, the page to get the free training is still under construction. I don't know when this will get released, but my website is just carolynrobistow.net. But if people want to find me on Instagram, I'm just at Carolyn Robistow, and just DM me. That's how I get most of my people. They just DM me and say, hey, can I get the training on Groundhog Day drinking? Or, hey, can I get the training on how to break a drinking habit without FOMO? Or I forget what the second part is. Just reach out. I'm a real person. This is not some crazy automated thing where you get a robot.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's made it very easy. Well, enjoy the rest of this journey. Thank you so much for making it happen today. We were not letting anything get in the way, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.